Hello, I'm Mike Jungbluth, animation director at BioWare, but I am not talking about anything that I've specifically worked on. Instead, what I'm here to talk about is survey results, data, and specifically the 2021 AnimState of the Industry survey results. Now, what is this? Really, this whole survey goes back to a question, right? And the idea is, what if there was just a way that we could speak freely about all of the stuff nobody ever likes to talk about? Maybe if there was a way to anonymously share that. And so really that's what this survey is. It's a survey that's open to people from the entire industry to talk and answer questions around all of the things that people sometimes are afraid to talk about. So before we get started, I do want to give us a caveat. I'm not a professional data analyst. I'm an animation director. So things about causation and correlation and margins of error. But I will at least say from the survey data question side, I did consult with a couple of professional data analysts. Shout out to Elizabeth Zelli and Luke Dickin for running through the survey, making sure that at least there was clarity in the questions, that there wasn't necessarily a ton of bias and all that stuff there. So with that said, let's start getting into it. So this year we had 335 responses, which is pretty good. Now, unfortunately, it's down from last year where we had 400 responses. That's a bit of a bummer because really more responses means more data, more answers, and that means better data, right? Because it's a larger sampling size. So if you're watching this and you filled it out, thank you. If you're watching this and you didn't know about it or you didn't fill it out, stay tuned to AnimState on the AnimState Twitter because we'll be doing this every year, and I know for sure we can get past 500 at least next year. So let's get into sort of the lens through which we will be viewing all of this. So 82% of the responses were full-time permanent employees within their profession. 73% are from the AAA space, and 68% are from North America. So in general, that's going to be the data that we most focus on because it's just the strongest and most amount of data to look at. Within disciplines, we're looking at 72% animators, 19% technical animators, 23% leads directors, and then 3% for programmers, outsource managers, and producers. So again, we'll cover and touch on some of the technical animators and leads and director stuff, but this is again largely focused on animators specifically. If you would like to have more of a focus on technical animators and outsource managers and programmers and all that, get them to fill out the survey next year. So 78% of people that responded are white, they're men, and they're not a parent. So as far as last year, we went up on the number of white people filling out. It was 75 last year, 78. So that's a bit of a bummer. We are down last year. It was 82% men. And this year it's 74%. So that's good. It's nice to see that we're getting, heading in the right direction towards actual representation of the world. So great to see. We can do better, but again, the lens through with which to look at all of this stuff. Okay, so let's get into specifics. Number one, compensation. We're just going to start with the thing that is not talked about openly by people. So let's get into it. First question is, well, one of the questions we asked was, how much do people feel that they're appropriately compensated for their work? Video games is a multi-billion-dollar industry. I was kind of interested in how do people feel like they're getting treated. It's higher than I expected. Obviously, was the overriding answer. So that's fair. I think most people think they're getting living wage, meeting the needs that they have, and then it trends up a little bit higher. So let's see how much of this is actually true. So let's start with 1 to 5 years experience. For this, I wanted, as I was looking through the data, you could see that there was sort of trends within the areas. So we have West Coast, which is California and Washington. In general, the high and low ends of the data that we got back was the same, so I'd lump them together. For the rest, U.S. and Central, this included Georgia, Colorado, Maryland, Texas, New York. What I would say with all of this is obviously Chicago, even though it's in U.S. Central, is going to be closer to probably a West Coast cost than, say, Champaign, Illinois, right, which is where Volition is at, where I used to be. So use this with the lens of your actual cost of living. So what we're looking at is on the West Coast, animators generally are starting out somewhere in the $60,000 range and can get up to, within that first 5 years, $130,000. So there's a huge, massive range there that is pretty intense. For the most part, people are looking somewhere between 70 and 90, it seems. When you move outside of the West Coast, you're starting a little bit lower at 50, heading up to 90, so less of sort of an extreme range, but still something to kind of keep in mind as to where people are at. So when we look outside of the States, in Canada, you're starting less than 40 when you start out, and then moving up to 80 within that first 5 years. And in the UK, starting out at less than 40, heading up to 60. So, I think it's interesting. You can see a little bit more of, there's less data, so of course things look a little bit more unified with each of these, right? But you can see the range, and I think in general, people sort of had an understanding that you're going to get higher salaries in the States than you do in Canada, and then in Canada than you do in the UK. But it's kind of nice to start to see some of this stuff very specifically. Again, if you want to see more of this, if you're in these areas, more people filling out from there is going to help out a lot. It wasn't 200 million, Lana. It's like 200,000, but you're getting ahead. You're giving spoilers. All right. So now let's move up to 6 to 10 years. We're starting at 80,000 for an animator, up to 180. Again, a pretty wide range there in the West Coast. More of a contained amount there as well in the U.S. and the Central and East Coast, starting at 60, moving up to 110. So you're seeing a consistent sort of band between all of these that I think is nice to see. But obviously, in this 6 to 10 year range, salaries can kind of kick up in a pretty big way. So when we look to Canada and the UK within that same range, it's a little bit more controlled here again as well. Again, lower, but here's the ranges you're looking at: 60 to 100, 50 to 90. So right within the ranges that we were looking before. Okay, 11 to 15. Here's where the fun starts, right? People are starting out at 90 in the West Coast, heading up to over 200,000. Something to think about where in that range you can get. Obviously, even just the largest portion is 120 to 130. So if you're in the West Coast, you've got that amount of experience. Hopefully, you're making that much. From the Central and the rest of the states, starting at 70, moving up to 130. So now here you're really starting to see, I think, some of the high-end differences between West Coast cost of living and paying for experience versus outside of the West Coast. All right, and then for animators with 16 to 25 years, this was the amount of data we had, so I figured I would just kind of slam it all together there for people to see. What I will say here, right, is that the range for 11 to 15 was higher than people 16 to 25. So there seems to be something here that, I don't know if people have just been in their roles for a long time, have been in a studio for a long time, They're used to maybe what cost and salaries used to be and don't realize where they can be pushing it towards now. But there certainly seems to be some sort of schism, something that happens right around that 15-year range where people aren't getting paid as much as people with less experience in them. So something to think about, reassess where you're at. This is a pretty significant hit to salaries once you hit that experience level. So big takeaway number one, 16 to 25 years, you deserve more money probably. So let's look at technical animators. With 1 to 5 years, they're starting at 80. So you can see already within the US, they're going to be starting at a higher price point or a salary point than animators are, and can quickly get up to over 100. 6 to 10, you're looking at 90 to 180. And then that 11 to 25, it starts to even out what it seems a technical animator and an animator is going to do. Likely at that skill level, that experience level, people are specialized enough, or they've were general enough, whatever their expertise is, to even out. But if you're starting out, you feel like you're an animator that also kind of likes the technical stuff, you're looking to make a little extra right out the gate, then technical animator is likely going to start you out at a higher price point than being an animator. So something to think about. Now, leads and directors. 1 to 5 years, you're looking up similar to what an animator is making. 6 to 10, you're starting to see it go up. Now you're starting to get a little bit higher with 100 to 130. That 11 to 15 year range, again, 11 to 15 years is like this super intense spot where you're making either like way more, or like people at that level seem to be understanding how to negotiate. They're really pushing it. And then again, you see that dip happening again here in that 16 to 20, and even a bit to the 21 to 25. So obviously, you move into lead and director, you're going to be making more. There's a 40 there that seems a little low end. Maybe it was a misclick. Again, there might be something that's happening there, but this is what you're looking at as far as salaries. So now let's talk about additional compensation, because all of this is base salary. So obviously, one of a regular question that's asked all the time online is, how much should I be charging an hour for doing work, doing animation work? And what we're looking at here is that the majority of people are charging somewhere between $26 to $50 an hour. If you're charging less than that and your work is worth it, that's where you should be starting, as far as I'm concerned. If most of the people are getting paid that, then that to me seems like sort of the base level. And people are getting up to 150. So the more specialized you are, the more senior you are, have confidence in what you're charging and know who it is that you're working with, because if they're a company with money, they're willing to pay these rates. So don't be afraid to ask what you're worth. All right, so now when we talk about, let's say, additional compensation, these are sort of the highest, most regular things that people are getting. An annual bonus, an annual raise, that seems to be pretty common, which is great to see. Then you start seeing overtime pay. That is a nice thing to see pop up here. I know in some places, contract versus salary will define some of that, but obviously we know this was a survey that was largely weighted towards full-time. So I didn't get a chance to cross-check those to see how many full-time are also getting paid overtime, but the data is there. We could sort of figure this stuff out. Then you see, bonuses on shipping, on royalties. If your company is a private or a public company, looking at stock, getting annual stock bonuses, performance bonuses of stock awarded based on how you're doing. Some other things that aren't on here that I thought were interesting that people called out that you can think about when you're negotiating your contract. So a hiring bonus, had people call that out. Milestone bonus, that's usually a little bit more towards probably the indie space, but something to still think about. A performance bonus for the friendliest employee. I don't know if this was a joke answer, but I really like the idea of people being rewarded for their soft skills and for not being an asshole. That sounds awesome. Health and wellness fund, meal tickets. Chances are I wish you probably just paid overtime, but maybe they're lunch tickets, and that's cool too. Receiving a raise, but it's not an annual raise. That showed up less than an annual raise. So if that's something that's happening at your company, I would start inquiring why. Stock rewards when they're hired, so to go along with a hiring bonus. Stock purchase plan. So there's a number of places that will allow that to come out of your check, whatever. Something worth inquiring about. And then a travel fund. So if you are living, say, out of state, province, country, wherever, it's worth asking, hey, I want to go visit here. I want to go do these things. All of these are the sort of options that are worth asking about and negotiating with when it comes time to your hiring, contracts, raises, all of that good stuff. Now, as far as the amount for compensation, in general, we're looking at somewhere between 15-20% of people are saying they're not getting this additional compensation, and the majority of who are getting something, if there was just one section, right, that's less than 5,000, but at almost another 50% across the board or more, people are making 5,000 or more, and in every one of these, for animators, leads, directors, and technical animators, we got some responses that said they're making over an additional $100,000 a year in additional compensation. So, yeah, I would now go back and say, okay, if you were to fill out that question again around how do you feel about are you being appropriately compensated, I wonder if we would still get meh in the middle. And I look forward to asking that question again next year, now that this data is out there, to see if that moves the needle a little bit on some of this stuff. But again, remember, apply this to your specific cost of living in the area that you have. Look up what the living wage is, what the quality of life is for living comfortably within your area, and where your experience level is, and start to calibrate all of these things around what you're worth and what you should be expecting. So now let's talk about work from home. This is, of course, what everyone is talking about really all the time right now, right? And of people we asked, currently 100% of the responses said that they are working from home. So that's great to see. In general, people working within the game industry are not being asked to go and work in a confined space during a pandemic with a number of other people. So this was well done. I like to see it. When we ask about what about work from home after the pandemic recedes, we found out that 14% said always work from home is what their company has already laid out. 26% are saying that it's a hybrid model, so maybe a few days a week from home, a few days from the office. 6% of studios are already saying, nope, there is no work from home. Once we're back, we're going back. And then 58% said no official policy yet. This doesn't add up to 100%. Again, not a professional data analyst. Maybe there's some misclicks. I don't know. But in general, I think you can see pretty clearly where people are looking at. And the majority, I think, of this is a lot of people are sort of in a holding pattern with their studios. And it's a bit of studios waiting, seeing which way things move. That we'll see. We'll see how well that works out. Let's look at remote work. So 86% of people said that right now their studio supports them working remotely. So outside of the geographical location that their studio is located. So that's cool. But when we ask about future remote work, here we're seeing it a little bit more. People are saying, no, they're not really going to support it. 44% are saying yes, and the official policy yet is 47%. So still unsure what remote work is going to mean once all of this is done. So The last question we asked around all this, though, was, would you leave your current job if your preferences around work from home and remote work are not met? And 43% of people say yes. So what all this tells me is that as more companies start saying what their policy is, this is where it starts happening. And the first really big studios, publishers, companies that say this is our plan and it hits those needs that people are asking for, they kind of get to eat the lunch of everybody else that's kind of holding back and not really sure. So we'll see, but there's a lot of people, almost half people are saying, if I don't get what I want and this is what the option space is, why am I going to stick around? So definitely something for studios to be thinking about as they take their time understanding what all this is going to mean. All right, so struggles and satisfaction are what I want to focus on next, because to me this is the number one thing that we actually do need to be talking about. This is the stuff that really impacts every day what we're doing. So this one's going to be a bit of the deepest of the dives that we're going on. So we ask a question around, what is the industry most struggling with and what is your studio most struggling with? And these are the areas that we asked. And these were based off of last year's surveys where people could just type in anything and then sort of grouped within all of that. So I just, to make things a little bit easier this year, brought those under it. So the biggest ones are from the industry side. They're saying we're struggling with compensation. Not as much on the studio side, but as an industry, compensation seems to be a problem. And this means non-competitive pay or benefits. Again, I'd be interested in seeing how this number changes. I would guess maybe studio doesn't go up or maybe studio probably goes up higher as people see what compensation looks like across the industry as opposed to what they're making and maybe what their peers are making if people start talking about this stuff more. I see that one maybe adjusting a little bit. Culture is one that people say as an industry, we struggle with this a lot. And that includes diversity, inclusion, equality, exploitation. There's stories almost every week, every month that regularly call out issues with all sorts of things within the game industry. So it's no surprise that people would say, as an industry, we struggle with it. Apparently, though, within our studios, it's not a big deal. It's like the third lowest issue. That seems not quite right. A little weird that everything's cool at home, but not outside of that. We'll see. Hiring. Everyone says internally hiring's a problem. It's hard. This means unable to find the talent needed or the skill set needed, barriers to being able to open up new positions, things of those nature, is something that's felt certainly across the board. Production is the one place where everything lined up, right? Like, as an industry and as a studio, people agree, yes, we are struggling on production issues like scope, team size, scheduling, communication. Nice to see that we've got some alignment happening there. And then finally, tech is the next, is tied for production, is something that most studios are struggling with as their highest percentage point, as opposed to them not seeing it across the industry. I would say, maybe there's something, as you listen to like the last talk with Brad and Raf and Lico talking about what tech is possible, that maybe we start to realize, well, what do I have, what is out there, and what is the possibility space, and some of that can be adjusted. So really, though, the industry stuff I find I like asking because I'm intrigued to understand what people's perception of the industry is. But to me, it's the studio-specific stuff that's what we really want to be comparing against and diving into, because it is all of the studio experiences that create the larger industry experience. And if any of this stuff needs to be addressed, it needs to be addressed on the studio levels, as opposed, to some overarching industry level, to make that momentum of change happen. So I wanted to dig in these a little bit. So I wanted to look at studio struggles compared to work-life balance. We said on a scale of 1 to 5, is your life work-life balance not at all balanced, or is it very balanced? And when I compare those responses against the studio struggles people listed out, there really wasn't a big noticeable trend here, right? Like, it wasn't like there was just one thing. If you can, create or remove creative struggles, then instantly work life becomes more balanced, right? Everything is sort of equally represented here for the most part. So not really a lot to go on here. So I said, okay, well, let's look at maybe job satisfaction. Let's do the same thing. Are you not at all satisfied with your job, or are you very satisfied with your job? And again, no really meaningful change here as far as what we're looking at. You can't just fix your hiring practice and see it go all the way up, or fix knowledge sharing and instantly it goes all the way up. So I was like, all right, well, this is kind of sucky because I'm supposed to do an hour-long talk about this data, and you compare them, and there's nothing there from what I can tell. So I said, well, let's try one more thing. Let's compare job satisfaction against work-life balance. And okay, wait, now here we go. Yes, okay, there is something here. If somebody says they are more satisfied with their job, it means their work-life balance is very balanced, is better, right? And as somebody says that their work-life balance is not at all balanced, their job satisfaction also seems to dip. So very clearly, we can see that those two things are like intertwined and very consistent. That you can't enjoy one with can't have be satisfied in your job unless you've got a life outside of it, right? Okay, sweet. Something to look at that isn't just the same 5 pies over and over again. So we're on to something here. So let's dig more into job satisfaction, because we know as we adjust job satisfaction, that can be tied to work-life balance also becoming hopefully better. So let's look at studio-provided training compared against job satisfaction. So what we're doing here is we're saying, does your studio provide the necessary training you need to do your job well? Very much so at the high end, and not at all on the low end. And here you can see the more a studio provides training to do your job better, the higher job satisfaction goes up, right? And when you get to they provide none or not much, job satisfaction goes quite a bit down. So if you're looking for a way to fix some satisfaction, some work-life balance, give your team some training. Ask to get more training, because all of that is going to help lift as not just yourself, but likely as the full team. Now let's look at career growth. Does your studio provide a clear path towards career growth? Again, against job satisfaction, if they very much chart out, here's how you can grow in your career, we see job satisfaction go quite a bit up. Even just some, right? Clarity makes an impact and keeps people at least to not dissatisfied, right? But as they provide no clear path for growth, instantly job satisfaction starts to plummet. So do you have a clear path towards how you want to advance your career, how you want to grow in your career, in your skill set? Does your studio provide it? If not, again, I would ask for this and look for it, because it's something that can hopefully help to remove some frustrations in your job satisfaction and in your teams. Now let's look at the confidence of animation leadership against job satisfaction. The more confident somebody is in their leadership, the higher they are in their job satisfaction. The less confident they are in their team's leadership, the less satisfied they are. So this is where being a lead, being a director, can have a huge impact. And really what this all ties into is, as you're listening to this, as Hector's great talk shows, like, all of this sort of comes down to leading with some amount of empathy, listening, understanding what it is your team needs, and by doing all of this, making sure you're giving clarity of vision, clarity in decisions, all of those things, get some leadership training. The more you focus on being a better leader within your team, you are going to see all of the job satisfaction stuff as well start to go up. A good way to start with that, get some training for yourself, get some training for the team. All of these things happening are going to help bring that up. So leadership, it's on us. If you're a leader or director, we have a large part to play, and we are responsible for team satisfaction. So let's look at how user-friendly engine workflows are. Talking makes your mouth dry. Who knew? I needed a survey to tell me that, probably. Okay, so the more user-friendly the tools are, the higher the job satisfaction goes. Now, this is one that sort of a neutral is pretty well represented across the board. So I don't know if this one necessarily hits to the same level as those other ones do, but you can certainly see that the more user-friendly the tools are, the better someone will be at their job, the more easily they'll be able to create the stuff that they're doing. The higher their job satisfaction is naturally going to go up. Again, as leaders, listening to your team, where do they need better tools and workflows, and focusing on that, training, all of this stuff really kind of goes hand in hand, right? None of the stuff should be mind-blowing, but you can see how all of these pieces start to fit together. Now, maybe you're thinking, is there something that we can do to shortcut this, to shortcut workflows and tools on the engine side to fix this? What if we just switch engines? Okay, I wanted to check that. Is there something inherent, like where you switch? And across the board, it stays the same. Whether someone's using Unreal, a proprietary engine, or Unity, the level of job satisfaction is consistent across the board, right? Every game is going to need to use an engine and create their own specific tools and workflows based on the specific needs of their game, their specific features. So there is no lucky silver bullet thing here that is going to solve that issue. So it's really just going to be the work that it takes to do it. So I want to look at job role. If you move to leader director, does that instantly make you more satisfied? Not really. Maybe a little bit, right? Like, I don't want to say, I guess 27 to 25% is a difference, but in general, if you're already frustrated, if you're already not satisfied, and somebody says, "Here's the keys," it's not just like instant satisfaction. So again, not something that's going to just quickly give somebody that, I'm happy. What about salary? Can we look at annual salary across the board? The darker sections are people who are making above 130, because that's in general a point where people are probably feeling pretty comfortable with their salary, what they're making. That certainly does influence a little bit, right? Like, you don't see anybody that is not at all satisfied making over 130. So it, a little bit of balm on the frustration, it would seem, but not instant, right? Like, it's still, thinking that if I get more money, I will be happier isn't really necessarily going to help. It might help a little bit, but it's not going to help a ton. So that isn't, again, going to be a silver bullet towards fixing your job satisfaction. The way that more training, better career growth, all of those things start to really pay off. Well, what about the additional compensation? This is the money that you never really take into account, right? You're always told, don't plan on anything extra, but if you get extra, does that help? Some, but I mean, you get people who are making more than $100,000 extra dollars a year in additional compensation in every one of these categories of job satisfaction. So again, just more money doesn't fix stuff. So still, get paid what you're worth. This isn't me saying don't actually try to fix the pay inequities that are happening that we saw. What about age and job satisfaction, right? Like I wanted to see if maybe there was something where we saw people over 11, past 15 years of experience were getting paid less. Maybe there's something where as people hit a certain age, they just all of a sudden become more satisfied. And again, not really the case in any meaningful way. There's a little bit there, but it's nothing like instantly jumps out at you and says, once I hit 40, everything's better, right? So age isn't really a thing for this. What about ethnicity? Is there something there? And oh my God, yes. Something seems to be in place that if you're not white, you are less satisfied in your work more often than white people. I don't think this has anything to do with the color of someone's skin. It's not like a percentage of melanin all of a sudden makes you less satisfied at giving life to characters and getting to create interesting experiences for players. To me, if it's not something inherent in a person, it's the system, right? And I don't think it should be a surprise to anyone. When we said, hey, the industry's got issues as around its culture, but studio-wise, it's fine. You're wrong. It's likely not. So to the 78% of white people that filled this out and are likely listening to the stream, we need to talk. We've got some work to do. This is a system that is a problem. This is something that we need to address, and we need to be having these conversations on, because the way, these are two books that are great, that I highly recommend. Obviously, as a white cisgender male, I do not necessarily understand my own implicit bias. So I need to listen. I need to read. I need to talk to people and understand how we can be allies in fixing this. So these are two great places to start. In general, like some analogies I've heard, this isn't saying that you haven't had to work hard to get where you're at, or you don't have frustrations in your job. It just means even if you're already playing on hard mode, there are people playing on nightmare mode, literally, right? There is just an ambient amount of noise that everyone has in their head. And as a white person, the amount of ambient noise in your head is less. And we need to start doing more to taking the ambient noise that we are forcing through a system on other people and bring that noise to us. And we need to be listening for other people's noise and removing that. So we need to read these. We need to talk about this stuff. It's going to be hard and difficult, and we're going to make mistakes when we talk about it. It's not comfortable. I'm sure I'm not doing justice to what needs to be said here, but we need to be talking about it, because really we need to dismantle white supremacy. So if, there are clearly universal ways that we can raise job satisfaction for everyone, but we need to be aware that they're not going to empower everyone equally. If you're a lead, a director, a manager, or a conference community organizer, it would be valuable to look through the lens of all of this data that we'll be releasing from the survey and see how it applies to your organization. And more than anything, if we want to create a truly representative industry, it's our responsibility to reach out, empower, and support your team members. This means regularly have one-on-one sessions and listen to what struggles your team are having and the areas of interest that they'd like to learn more about, because all of that is going to help them grow in their career, get training. All of the things that we know make meaningful difference in creating more job satisfaction and work-life balance. Because really, all of this data isn't anything that should be like mind-shatteringly new information. It doesn't replace the one-on-one, face-to-face conversations that are required in building the trust needed to create a fully inclusive and representative industry. Oh, and just because the total percentage of men dropped in relation to other genders this year, we still have a long way to go towards representation that probably or properly reflects gender. Last year's data on AnimState, I did a deep dive on all of this around gender, and that is still as relevant now as it was last year. You cannot dismantle white supremacy without dismantling the patriarchy. Okay, so let's talk about AAA and indie, and if the grass is actually greener. So, no, job satisfaction across indie, AAA, or people sort of working in a mix between them, it's really the same. Instantly switching one isn't going to do it. Now, if switching gives you the opportunity for training, career growth, all of that stuff, leadership that you can trust, all of those things, then yes, your job satisfaction is going to go up. But that isn't anything inherently, unique to one over the other. Same with work-life balance. It's pretty much the same, except that if you go indie, the most unbalanced at the far end, indie actually kind of moved up some there. I don't think it's a shock to anyone that when they move into an indie space, especially if they're starting an indie studio, the amount of responsibility and stress that is likely going to be on you is more than ones that you had within a studio structure. So talk to anyone that's indie, and likely they're going to be having it. But in general, work-life balance from the responses we received are about the same. So then let's look at the average hours a week that's worked between the two. The majority in both is 40 to 45, which is nice to see. Indie has has opportunities to work less than 40, which is cool to see. On the high end, yep, you are getting some more average work hours within AAA. Now, the high end is about the same. That 71 to 80 is the same percentage between the two, but there's sort of more of a gradient of more than 45 that you're starting to see in AAA space. So again, this is through the lens of, was it 70, 80% AAA? More indie would help. Obviously, AAA teams are going to have more, so just by the nature of somebody saying, hey, I want my entire team to fill this out, you're going to see that those disparities happen to some degree, but more indie means we can run this again next year. So now miscellaneous. I just want to talk about some random stuff that I also found interesting within our questions. So I wanted to know, what is people's favorite stage of the process? There was saw something. I think it was Gwen Frey. I know Ryan Duff talks about this a lot. There's some people that are like good at finishing and good at starting projects, prototyping and finishing, and finding out who they are is really important, right? And so this was kind of around that. I wanted to see who liked what parts the best. And in general, most people really liked prototyping. That was their favorite at 58%. Filing, polishing, bug fixing, the little noodly stuff is the next highest at 22, and then it starts to dip, right? So concepting is like brainstorming and all that good stuff. Directing, so that's like directing not just actors on a stage, but also doing reviews and critiques and all of that. And then production, the managing scope, budgets, all of those things is at 1%. I would say find out, like, be honest with yourself as to which one of these you're most excited about and you find most interest in, because when you align that to the part of your process, part of the project that you're going to be working on, understand what that's going to mean for your general mood and enthusiasm and creative battery. If you're somebody that loves finaling, but you're working on a project with a lot of pre-production, there's a good chance that you might be getting like angsty because you just want to get to that polish, right? Likewise, maybe you love prototyping, you hate finaling, and so those last 6 months of, or whatever, that last bit of time where you really have to polish something, you fall off. when you're getting paid, you don't necessarily get the option to choose only doing one of these. So be conscious of where you're probably going to have to be a little bit more focused, and where you're going to have to be more aware of what you need to put into it. I will also say that if you're in that 1% that called out production, you're awesome. That is a place that both industry and studio people recognize we need more support. So if you're in that 1%, please, on AnimState, on Twitter, reach out to me. I want to hear more talks about this stuff. I want to see more of this stuff, and have more of those conversations, because you probably are thinking about stuff in a way that's going to hit on what could fix a number of issues that people run into. So now I wanted to look at how important do you believe it is to spend your free time working on animation-related projects. But I wanted to look at it by number of years in the industry, right? Because as somebody's more senior, maybe they care about it or think it's a little less important, which is generally sort of true. I mean, they're not wildly off, these graphs, and over in most cases, the majority is saying that it's not at all important or not important to be working on animation things in your free time. And I think there's or a large amount that just say, I don't care either way. And I think this is important because I think there's something that gets ingrained in us when we're in school around, I know at least when I went to school, which was 20 years ago now, 15, 20 years ago, my professor said, if you have a social life, you're doing it wrong. And that sort of mindset gets in your head that you see people all the time going, I'm not animating after work, I'm not animating at home, and I'm feeling guilty about it. And you don't have to, right? Like, more in all of these graphs, 75, 70, 65% of people are saying it doesn't matter, right? I see a lot of comments going like, oh, that's a terrible thing to say to students. And where I'll caveat that a little bit is that I also think there is a certain amount of trying to impart responsibility on a bunch of kids that just go into school and don't have parents and maybe aren't taking the work as seriously as they should. Give maximum fucks while you're at work. Once you're out of work, you don't have to be spending all your time giving maximum fucks about animation. Remember, work-life balance, super important. Focus on the things that fill up your creative battery, especially if you're working on a part of the process that you don't naturally get excited about. Forcing yourself to do something you don't want to be doing in your free time is going to be a problem. And nobody's judging you if you don't do animation outside of it. Now, that said, if people do want to be working on stuff outside of it in their free time, this is where most people seem to be spending their time. So doing animation, not a shocker, it's like 72%, 78% of animators filled this out. So no surprise that that's the majority there. Online courses, giving some direction, some focus on what you're doing on, great. Indie game dev, and then you see sort of the mix of them there. So the sort of things people do like to work on outside of it. Okay, so which part do you want to advance your career, right? We talked about clarity of job growth is important. And I was interested in kind of seeing where is it people want to go, because for the longest time, it was always, I need to become a leader or director. That was where everyone thought they had to go, because what else is there? And it's nice to see that senior or principal is now almost as real a thing as leader or director, which is great, because only 6% of people said they really got excited about directing, and only 1% around production. So I think that's probably not the place where a lot of people actually want to be going. So seeing that people have a clear vision of not having to be leader or director is great. Indie game dev is cool. People calling out being a creative director or studio director, which I rolled under that. Great to see that there are more people in the animation space wanting to move there. Retirement making a little bit of a sliver. That one wasn't on the list, so I'll take that as my bad. I'll add it next time, and we'll get more people probably going, oh yeah, that does sound nice. Maybe not. We'll see. Okay, so we talked about 43% of people said that they're just willing to leave if they don't get what they want as far as their work preferences at home. And tied to that is what happens when people leave? Why are they leaving? And 23% of people last year say they actually did leave and start work in a new studio this year. And the reasons for leaving, number one, frustrations with leadership. That's promise. That's what it says. Is the biggest one, right? And as we saw, team leadership matters in job satisfaction. Team leadership helps to provide training. Team leadership helps to provide career growth opportunities. So it shouldn't be surprising that is driving a lot of this, along with career growth and creative stagnation, which leadership is largely driving a number of those things, right? We also see a big amount on better pay. And, obviously we've called out that pay alone isn't going to be enough. So if it's just pay that you're leaving for and you haven't identified what your frustrations are beyond that, to make sure they're not at the next studio, then there is likely a chance you will get frustrated again very quickly there, if those same frustrations exist. Harassment is pretty low. It's the fact that it's there at all is really gross, and something obviously that, god damn it, can't that be zero? Okay, so let's end on a high note, because this has kind of been up and down, a little bit heavy, not necessarily the most fun topics. What has you most excited about the future of game animation? And the largest amount is the creative possibilities. That's great. People say they want to do creative things like new ideas, new styles, quality of the product, keyframing, all of that stuff is what has people excited. That's great to see. Same with tech. People are excited about a lot of the new tech things that they see, and what that means for them. And then it's also great to see that then in third is culture. That's great. That means that the team, as a community, we are hopeful that those issues we talk about, white supremacy and the patriarchy, are not as strong as they maybe once were, and we have an opportunity there and a willing space, a willing community to address all of this, which I absolutely love to see. So, wanted to end on a high note. The other part of stuff like this, we also asked a question around what are these sort of specific things you want to learn more about. We can use this information for future animation exchange and say, cool, let's make sure we've got this sort of percentage of talks, because we know this is the number of things people want to listen about and we can focus on, which I think is a great opportunity. Okay, so one more thing I did want to call out. On top of the annual survey that we do, this last year I put out the animation team size calculator and the post-project animation team survey. Oftentimes, when you're starting a game, they go, well, you want us to compete with that game? They had this many animators, or this long in production, and they had technical animators, and we don't. And they had dedicated animation programmers, and all of those things. So what I did was I created this calculator with team sizes that are vetted by people within the industry, but then also on credits pages within the games themselves. You can rate sort of where their quality bar is based on the quality bar that you're being asked to produce. You can see then on average, either the mean or the median of how many people you would need on your team to hit that. What I'm looking to do with the team survey is to now take that information, have people fill it out when they ship their game. That data will then directly go into feed the sheet so that it can sort of auto update itself. That is next on my list. If you fill out the team survey, you can find it on AnimState. It will be there so that when this comes in, that can all get piped in. So if everyone can sort of put this into their mind, when I finish a game, I fill out the sheet. That would actually be another huge way of getting all of this information out to people. So with that, that's everything I got. I'll be posting this slide deck, the full results of the Excel data on AnimState.com. If you follow AnimState on Twitter, you'll be able to see when we update it there. And then you can find me at Lightbulb Mike. I went a little bit longer than I thought, so we've got just a few minutes. But we just have the one question so far. Let's see. This is regardless of role, right? Just experience. I don't know what that one was in regards to. Oh, to salary. So that was the original graphs, the pie charts, were for animators at that experience level. I did call out leads and directors and technical animators on their own as well. There just wasn't enough for producers and programmers to be able to say anything of any quality.
Thank you so much for doing this talk. Like, I really love how you took the data and you really applied it to what you as a lead can do, and you also as one of the heads of AnimState can do with that data, and also what we can do for the future of animation exchange. That's really inspiring. So thank
Thanks.
you so much.
Well, thanks to everyone that filled it out. I know, one of the comments was somebody saying, I don't know if I want to fill this out again next year because I didn't like some of the answers that I had to give. And I totally understand, right? Like, this isn't necessarily a feel good survey, but it is painting a picture that I don't think we get as clearly painted as, ever. So
Yeah,
please fill it out
absolutely.
again, and please get more people to fill it out because really this is only as valuable as the amount of people filling it out.
Yeah. Also, nothing will change if nobody knows about it, especially the people in charge. So as much information can get out there as possible, I think is always, always good. So yes, please fill it out next time.
Yeah, and I would say probably every studio, every corporation, whatever, already knows all this. They run their own internal surveys. They do all of their own information gathering. They know all of this, so none of this is going to be a surprise to probably your studio head or maybe even your executive producer, anyone like that. And that's fine. They should get to know it. We need to know it too, right? So this is how we do it.
Mhm. Oh, you do have a question, and it's what's
Oh
your
yes.
favorite book behind you?
Oh, what's my favorite book behind? All right, let me. Um, my favorite book behind me. So I have two probably. This one, Milton Ragavan's The Forgotten Ones.
Oh, okay.
Uh, this was a photographer who went to like Buffalo, New York. He would go every like decade and film the same people and see how their sort of lives have changed. Really great storytelling in there. And then the other one, uh, just because I like talking about these things,
Yeah.
Game Feel. This is the book that if you're an animator wanting to dig more into game design, or if you really like Nathan Dunlap's talk, this book is one that you'll also really enjoy.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll have to pick that up. And also on stream, very quickly, can you admit to everyone who your favorite Ninja Turtle is?
Michelangelo,
All
without a
right.
doubt. I mean, we share the
Awesome.
same name. He's a party dude. Come on.
We will all call Mikey Angelo from now on. We are
Fine, I'll take it.
united in this animation community. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was fun. Thanks, everyone.